On today's show, we are diving into one of the region's most exciting streaming platforms, TOD. It's a subscription-based OTT platform from BN Media Group that gives users exclusive access to live and recorded sports in multiple languages, along with a wide range of premium entertainment. So basically think blockbuster films, hit Arabic and Turkish series, and kids programming all in one place. And joining us to talk about TOD's growth, its partnerships, and how it's shaping the future of sports and digital media is John-Paul, VP of Marketing and Sales at TOD. John, it's lovely to have you today. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks, and thanks for having me.
We're just having a conversation before it about sports. So yeah, I think we've done the warm-up. But let's start with the very first question. Yesterday I had a guest and I came up with a very nice question. What's the meaning of TOD? Does it stand for something, TV on demand? Or what's the story behind the name?
Story behind the name. So the name was actually arrived on before I actually joined the business. So nice. I don't know where it came from. I do know that there was a project that was developed in order to find the most appropriate name. Nice. And in fact, of the three that were selected, TOD was not one of them. So I think at some point a decision was taken quite late in the show. It doesn't actually stand for anything. So TOD is TOD. You could say it's television on demand. I think that was an acronym that was used at the time. But from a branding standpoint, no, it's just straight up TOD.
Nice.
Okay, and so just to start off, so TOD, it was launched in 2022 under BN Media Group. What I want to know is, how did you guys become so big, and what gaps specifically did you identify in the market that made TOD what it is today?
So I think there's probably two things to say. Content has moved from broadcast distribution into online. And so the opportunity for BN Media Group was to enter into the online community as a distribution method. And so TOD became the vehicle through which to do that. It was an enhancement and a sort of migration away from BN Connect, which was the catch-up service that was available through BN. But they wanted to do more. And I think part of the story of the branding is that we're more than sports. And we talked a little bit about that at the start. BN Media Group's very large. It owns Miramax Studios. We've got studios in Turkey. We've got broadcast distribution across the planet. So we wanted to balance out that strategy a little bit. So sports on demand through OTT becomes the opportunity. There's not a lot of businesses globally that do that, and that was the gap that we had identified. I think there's a lot of reasons for why that is a better experience, but we might touch base on those in a bit.
And you offer exclusive live sports, as you said, premium entertainment, and even kids programming, and in multiple languages. We were talking about it outside. You were telling me how it's stitched into it. It was really interesting to know. How did TOD strike the right balance? How do you segment your audience? Where does the money come from? Do you think sports works more and then you do kids programming because it's needed, it's a market, or just to diversify the options?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. And so I think there's probably a lot of different ways to answer it. The critical part is that sports is live content, and live content is highly, highly valuable, right? And so from an acquisition standpoint, leading with sports as an acquisition solution is a very efficient way to bring on an audience. But you pay through the sports rights. On the flip side, if you're in an entertainment-first strategy, you need to create that demand, right? So your marketing campaigns, the investment, you might spend $100 million on a film, and then $100 million promoting the film that you've just done, right? And so there's a very, very different strategy that forms the two. We are a sports-first acquisition strategy, and then we're a family-friendly content proposition. And so we acquire in sports and we engage through entertainment. And so we bring you in on one, and then we offer the opportunity for the rest to come through. We've got profiles, targeting children. We've got profiles targeting the rest of the family. We've picked up Turkish dramas. We've got the Arabic slate inside of the platform, and therefore we can bring you in on this one, and we keep the rest of the family happy with the rest.
Just speaking of bringing us Arabic speakers into everything, I feel like we can all agree with this. The Arab region, it's so culturally distinct. So what I want to know is, how do you use specific marketing and sales strategies to reach those local people in the region that all come from different places, speak different Arabic dialects?
Yeah, so that's the fun of the game, right? The good news is that digital is very diverse, and so you can be very, very segmented in the way that you do your marketing campaigns. I think there's probably more to it than just that. Obviously, you can offer a different message in every territory, and you can offer it in the local dialect, but you also pick the right person insofar as the interests. And so if we're looking at Egypt, it's Mo Salah. If we're looking into UAE, it's often Man City, right? And so who you lead with is relevant to the audience that you are actually attracting. Obviously, the same thing goes, and content naturally segments into this space anyway, because you're normally picked by origin, right? So whereas Arabic content, is it Egyptian, is it Khaliji, is it Levant, depending on where it is and what it is, we pick the stars, we pick the audience, we pick the channel for communicating through.
You've talked about this, and I think the next question is, how do you personalize it? And I know AI is the coolest word right now. Even if someone doesn't have AI in their system, they're saying, oh, we are AI powered and this and that. How much of AI do you use to personalize it?
Yeah, so lots, right?
Lots.
So I think we are probably the broadest broadcaster of sports globally, right? In terms of the number of assets that we have available on any given weekend. So you can imagine something as complicated or as simple as highlights. If you want to produce highlights for every match, for every league, every game, every weekend, right, you end up with a very, very large bouquet of assets that you need to work with, and that's a lot of firepower in terms of people to produce. So AI plays a fantastic role in that space, and obviously if you can clip it and get it into a smaller format with the support of a tool, you can scale that out. Where it gets really interesting, and I think this is the fun part, right, is where you get to tailor that highlight to that user. And we're starting to explore various companies that will say, look, if you're a fan of a particular player and we have identified that through your viewing profile, then we will curate your highlights for you, right? And so that becomes a really, really nice way of saying your version of the game might be slightly different to yours. Obviously, it's the same match, but you got to see who you wanted to see through the course of that.
I understand this a lot because, again, coming back to cricket, Todd is from Australia, I'm from Pakistan. Cricket runs kind of in our blood. Just a small observation that, usually when I go to YouTube and I want to watch an ODI highlights, I look for wickets. I don't want to see the sixes and fours and everything. I want to see the wickets, the bowls and LBWs and the catches and everything. Likewise in football, I think someone wants to see the goals only, not the missed chances. Someone wants to see the goalkeeper making saves.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, look, we've got, there's a lot of stats-based programs out there that you can link to, right? So they'll put a tag into the asset that tells you when the event occurred, and then you select those events and you can curate your highlights from that. So if you want to see TOD 360 feature does this for us on the platform, but if you pivot the phone onto its side, or in fact it's now available on large screen, you can kind of skip 2 highlights, right? And so it means that you're able to scan across the full match and go to the parts that you want to. And I think the next step for that is, can we take that clip and then let you share that for a conversation with a mate? Because, football is a social event. It's not something that you tend to watch on your own. So did you see this? Do you think he was offside? All of those sorts of things that you can create community and conversations from, that's all going to spin out of this space.
And just speaking about like community and conversations, we want to ask you about partnerships. So from Harmonic and LiveLike to Friend, MTS, Todd has made really big tech collaborations. What I want to ask you is, which of these have had the biggest impact on audience experience and content production, and how do you evaluate like future potential partners?
That's a really tough question, right? So, when do you take different features that have quite different impacts and try and compare them? It's quite tough, right? So, Harmonic is largely the video playout functionality, and what it is about is the quality, right? So we're desperately keen to ensure that we've got infinite scalability through the internet. So our ability to send more pixels per picture is scaled based on your bandwidth. We're not bound by broadcast airwaves, and therefore we want to go to the absolute maximum. Harmonic is the guy that's going to give us that ability to do that. And quality sells, right? 4K is a massive feature set, HDR is a huge feature set. But the other stuff is gamification and engagement, right? So, as you get into the social interactions and the features like voting, polling, all of those sorts of functions, it's very hard to compare those two, right? So I think our aim is to do them all. I think the objective is to try and figure out which one's going to be the most beneficial. And I think commercial drives a lot of that insofar as what are you prepared to pay for, right? Yeah. So, and I think that pivots a little bit. We thought quality first, gamification second.
We talked about personalization and how you're targeting originals. TOD originals are like, I think, one of the biggest engagement tools. What I've understood, you're bringing in people from sports, and then engagement, I guess, is through TOD originals. How do you strategize it? What do you acquire? Why? It's a sports focused also. We're talking about Entrepreneur
Yeah.
with Rich. How do you do that? Like, what's the philosophy and the strategy behind it?
Yeah, so look, we do two sorts of productions. So we do sports docuseries, which is the Enjabeurs and, the Maltese Bartians and, Playing with Faith was the most recent one. We also do our entertainment productions, and that is, we've got Miramax as a part of our DNA, and we've got the ability, therefore, to use almost Hollywood quality production techniques and apply it to Arabic productions. And so we really want to go after a quality session. But coming back to your, the sports piece, there's two parts to sports that we always talk about. There are tentpole assets that that will bring people, and there are other sports that you need to make popular. And to create a popularity, you need to be able to identify somehow with the people that are in it, right? And Drive to Survive success in Netflix is a very clear bench-setting standard. And we've done similar things where we've taken Arab local heroes and tried to create a story, because their stories are fantastic, to popularise the sport and then bring awareness into the category. And so Enjabeur, Tunisian tennis player, highly, highly successful, great story, right?
Yeah.
We then shifted that in. I think it was aired in, I think it was on BBC, don't quote me on it, in the UK. But clearly there's an opportunity for beIN to play a role to take Arab local to global.
And speaking of that opportunity, I feel that we all know that now the MENA region, it's become such a global sports hub with all these players, coming to Saudi Arabia, like we've seen. How, from a marketing and a fan engagement perspective, what trends are unique to this region, and how do you guys specifically capitalize on them? Please give specific examples.
Wow. Specific examples, that's tough. Look, I think there is some major fundamental differences between MENA as a region, the GCC, and the rest of the world, right? E-commerce maturity is probably at the very centre of it, right? And, as an Australian, my internet experience began on a desktop at home, and that was very much the norm in the West. That is not the norm here, right? So most people's first internet experience comes through mobile, and the population in this part of the world is very much under 24, right? So how do they engage? What do they interact with? It's very much mobile first driven. So everything that you then need to do needs to pivot towards that landscape versus that landscape, insofar as are you portrait or are you, literally landscape? I think from that, it's the social interactivity with the players as a consequence of their own fandoms on their own networks, and the role that the league plays versus the player.
Yeah. Champions League, UEFA Champions League. How do you activate such a big event? What goes into it? Like the work, the strategy, the marketing, what goes into?
So it's interesting you ask. I saw a 56-page PowerPoint presentation just before I came over for the broadcast side of this weekend. So, there's a whole storytelling piece that comes around the sports. What do we do on Friday? What are we doing on Saturday? What do we do post-match and all the way through? I think from a marketing standpoint, it's, where do you want to watch it? TOD is a convenience-based play, right? So, most people will go to a large screen environment to watch this match, and we know that. Therefore, we often do activations with local places as watch parties to try and generate further awareness for TOD, but also, Champions Leagues will be available in HDR only on TOD. So the best quality version of watching it in the MENA region will be through us in this instance. So watch parties. We do a lot on social media. We do a lot on all of our paid marketing campaigns, and we queue those up subject to when we know who is actually playing, but obviously we've known for a little while for the final, quite a bit in advance, and then push across all of our networks as well.
And, John, this is something I'm really curious about. What have you seen actually change in consumer behavior? So, like, in terms of their viewing patterns, binge watching, and, these patrons, how have they shaped TOD's content strategy?
So short format is a very popular format for content at the moment, right? And so we see that through user-generated stuff, and YouTube seems to be, is the king of the space for this. But the reality is that it's also changed the shape of way people engage in sport, right? So many, many years ago, the NBA came out and said, we've noticed that the total viewing audience of live matches is falling, but our overall engagement in the sport is the highest it's ever been. So when that is true, you've got to start to try and think about, how do I engage with those fans? And so from a TOD standpoint, we bring a lot of information into the platform that may not necessarily require you to watch the match, but you will be able to follow what is going along, right? We connect that with our social platform, so you can almost track live in real time what's happening in terms of score updates. But obviously the other side of the story is spoiler alerts, because if you do want to watch the game, you don't want to find out through your social platform before you've had a chance to go for it. Right, so we have a switch inside of the new platform around spoiler alerts on and off that'll allow you to deactivate the notifications, remove the live score updates, all the match statistics get removed. Right, so I think this is the user engagement change. People are looking on their phone. We're seeing second screen viewing habits start quite often. You'll have one match up here, another one down here as it's going, and then you want to be able to communicate with your mates as well.
Yeah, I would want you to tell us that micro to macro, local to global theory that we were talking about outside, and in the perspective of the emerging technology, format, types of content that you're doing. You gave a very good example. I would love to hear that again. Where you said that you can go from local to global and global to local and create heroes, maybe create a local hero, take him to the global stage.
So I think the conversation we had outside, right? So look, Onjabeur was the example, but Maltese Barsham is another, and I think we've just started playing with faith. And I think the objective here is, as a domestic first broadcaster, as being, our DNA is Arab, right? We are in this territory, and we're very much that sort of Arab first mentality. And there's a wealth of stories in this region that we are able to gather and create professional versions from. beIN's a global broadcaster, right? With our Miramax, Digiturk, we've got presence in territories all the way from the US, South America, across in Australia, through Australasia. We broadcast through Amazon Prime Video and into those territories. We're virtually everywhere. So our opportunity is to take a local story and make it in a way that you can sell it globally, right? And so the objective for the industry is for us to be able to harness the power of the local stories and then bring them out. The reverse is also true, and you're starting to see this happen with Amazon Prime productions or Netflix productions, where they're starting to tap into the domestic markets and bringing in their version of storytelling and to try and apply it into an Arab landscape. And we're seeing various degrees of success with that, because you can't apply, I don't think you can apply the same storytelling techniques in both markets. And I think one of the reasons that some of the most popular shows that are now floating through in the Netflix environment are actually not Western. Their breakout shows tend to be international, and the Squid Games is a great example of a different storytelling style that comes out of the Korean landscape with a very different architecture that is very interesting as a sudden, quite different to a global audience. And I see there's a big opportunity for beIN in that space.
Perfectly right. La Casa de Papel, Money Heist, if you pick 10 great shows of the last 5 or 10 years, 5 or 6 of them would be from some other non-English speaking regions. And they're doing great with dubbings and even everything.
Studio Ghibli is another example. It's massively popular.
For the final question of today, we want to ask you, what's next for Todd? Are there any exciting collaborations, any exciting new tech product? Please tell us.
Okay, so look, we're still on our journey. So I think the path for us forward is about trying to make it more affordable, right? And so affordability is a big issue in this region, but largely not about. It's this e-commerce challenge that we have. So indirect monetization for Todd is going to be something that we look at. We are trying to introduce more advertising revenue streams into the business lines, and that could facilitate different pricing structures in place, right? We do partnerships with operators all the time. And so, we're expanding. We only launched 3 years ago. We're very large already, but, North Africa and French-speaking North Africa is a playground that we're desperate to try and make more of. It's also very challenging as a market to try and monetize, right? Because the domestic situation for banking and infrastructure is not that very well developed. Gamification is the other one, right? So we touched on it before, but there's a lot of opportunity in that space, and we're quite looking forward to introducing the polling features, the profiling pieces. We've tested a few concepts with some spin-offs that do SMS chat communities on the back of your fans and creating little pockets of opportunity for you to go and talk about your favourite teams with people that you may not have otherwise met. And I think the other one that we talked about outside was, how far can we take personalisation for the commentary, right? And so the concept that we're starting to play around with is pick your audio track. If I can select an audio track on the platform and you can choose your commentator, then your commentary team might be your favourite guys that work in Bahrain, or it could be in Iraq or in Egypt. And suddenly you've got a very hyper-local experience coming into the game.
Imagine Mo Vlogs commentating on a football game.
He's
the big guy here. Imagine him, right? So having those... Thank you so much, John. It was great, very high, like illuminating. I've known about the industry, but this deep insights. Thanks to you for coming
Yeah.
today.